wanted to see what would grow and what wouldn't grow. We're at about 2,900 feet. It was actually a greater revelation.
Somehow I think our Father has a purpose in all of this. One of his purposes is to keep us in the Word.
But what we're trying to show people is that they can actually do this. And I know they can because we're doing it.
Okay, so we talked a couple days ago about our journey of how God brought us out to the mountains, to the wilderness, and showed you how the Spirit led us. And today we want to talk about some preliminary practical steps that you can take before actually moving, that you can do right now wherever you're at. But first, we want to explain maybe why God would like his people in the wilderness setting, away from the cities. So we're going to take a look at Ezekiel 33, 1-8, and we're going to pull it up on the screen here. So
this is Ezekiel speaking, starting out in verse 1 of Ezekiel 33. Again the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of thy people, and say unto them, when I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set him for their watchman, if when he sees the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet and warns the people, then whosoever heareth the sound of the trumpet and taketh not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him, but he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. So this is a comparison between those who take action and those who sit idle. But if the watchmen see the sword come, and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. So thou, O son of man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore thou shalt hear the word at my mouth, and warn them from me. When I say unto the wicked, O wicked man, thou shalt surely die, if thou dost not speak to warn the wicked from his way, that wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at thine hand. So I believe that the watchmen in verses 3-5 are different than the watchmen from verses 6-8. The watchmen in verses 3-5 were people who listened to Yeshua and were able to sound an alarm when the sword came into the land. The watchmen in verse 6 and 8 were people who weren't able to blow the alarm. Why is that? Well, I know I'm here in the wilderness. I am here to create an ark of safety for the saving of my family, going as I go into the time of trouble. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to cry aloud and spare not, like the watchman in verse 3. I personally don't think that I can be doing this in the city. I don't think I can be a watchman in any city. I don't believe that I can.
Why?
Yeah, why? Why might you be thinking of that? Why can't a watchman be in a city?
I don't know that it's that a watchman can't be in a city. Is the city the best place for the watchman?
To do efficiently that which he is called to do. Exactly. We know that North America eventually is going to have some rough times come upon it. We know, as we read in prophecy, as we read in Matthew, and as we read in Revelation and Daniel, that the state of this country is going to be very different from it's going to be a third world country. I'm going to be bold to say that it's going to be a third world country, and there will be great suffering. Gardens in the city will be robbed by starving people, and we talked about some of this just the other night. Homes will be taken over. Every grocery store will be a wasteland. The cities will be in full destruction, and this isn't even the beginning of the time of trouble. Now, why would I even want to be a watchman at all? The voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight the desert a highway of our God. John the Baptist was located in the wilderness. Abraham, the father of our faith, was also in a hill country, and Elijah was also not in any kind of a city. Yeshua commands us to go into the wilderness because of the destruction that is sure to come. We will have brought destruction on ourselves prematurely if we do not remove ourselves from the cities. What good are we to others if we are still located in the city when war between the U.S. and the Middle East breaks out? The economy crashes and chaos ensues. We won't be able to create an ark of safety. We won't be able to cry aloud or spare not, like the watchmen, like that was their job. If we are in the city when the time of trouble begins, we won't be able to be a watchman. We won't be able to do this.
Well, because if they're in the cities with everyone else, won't they be suffering alongside of everyone else?
Right.
Right.
What kind of a witness?
Yeah.
What kind of a witness would that be? If destruction comes, and I mean, what are you going to be crying a lot? Like, what are you going to be doing?
Oh, you'll be crying, all right.
Yeah. Right now, we need to heed the call to go to the wilderness. Now, we need to prepare in advance. We're called to do this. This will place us in a position where we can serve and minister to the world from our place of refuge where God has led us.
If you love me, keep my commandments, John 14:15. And he saith unto him, feed my sheep, John 21:16. You know, I think it's going to be really exciting to be a part of this group if we choose to help spread the gospel in such a dark time. And do you guys think that we could bring comfort to a dying world if we set ourselves up in a place where we could do that, in a place of refuge? Does anyone believe that? So blessed be the Father, the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Ecclesiastes 44:10. Now, let me ask you a question. Wouldn't each one of you want to set yourself up in the best possible location to help the lost sheep and to help yourself? There's a time of trouble coming such as never was, and we will be a part of it, whether you believe it or not. There's a lot of people out there that don't believe it. They think they're going to be whisked away and they're not going to have to be a part of that. But we need to prepare for it. And Seb knows this saying. I don't know this saying.
Yeah, right. So there's a saying, there's a popular saying that says, if you want to help others, you have to help yourself first.
That's from Alcoholics Anonymous, right?
I believe
Something
it's from
like
there,
that.
yeah.
So we're out here because we want to be a watchman on the wall, and we want to prepare an ark. So we're going to switch gears now completely, and we're going to look at some practical ways that you can help yourself right now to prepare for the place that God has selected for you. And he may not have selected it for you yet, but he will have something for you. And this isn't an exhaustive list by any means. You could go on and on and on, but it will give you a starting point. I thought we'd start with financial preparation because this is probably the number one question that I get asked, and the number one reason that I get from people, because it's so overwhelming to them, and why they're actually not preparing. They're not really thinking about anything else. They're thinking about the money situation, and they don't even know where to start. So we're going to take a look at a few things. So the first thing is, owe no man anything. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another, for whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. Romans 13:8. So wherever you're at right now in your current situation, don't borrow another single penny from anyone. And if you have any debt, you want to get it paid off. Remember in our talk the other day, we purposed in our hearts, we said, God, we don't want to have any more debt. Help us get out of that debt. And that's, what we did. And we didn't go into any more debt after that. because being in debt will leave you in a place of hopelessness, and it will hold you back from the direction that God wants to take you. And the enemy sure loves to, drag us into that stronghold. So the first place that you'll want to start if you're in debt is to, and this is just my opinion, honestly. So you can take it or leave it or throw it out, whatever you want to do with it. But is to examine your spiritual life and your mentality surrounding money. So what is the reason why you're in debt? So you can ask yourself some of these questions. Do I understand that I'm a steward of the money that God's given me, and that his guidance is imperative in all of my financial decisions? Am I doing everything in decency and order? 1 Corinthians 14:40 talks about that. Are you using the time that God has given you to financially take care of yourself and your family? Or are you kind of sitting idle? Do you have a victim mentality? I'll never pay off my debts. I'll always be poor. Maybe you are feeling like you're entitled to be reliant on others. And if we look at Proverbs 23:7, it says, "For as he thinks in his heart, so is he." So being in debt is not really about the numbers. It's actually more about our mindset and the behaviors that got us into that position in the first place. And likely comes from, probably our upbringing, how we were taught from our parents and the influences around us. And you know what? Some of you may not have any debt in this room at all, so you might want to throw this out the window. But there's a lot of people out there who do have debt, and the statistics are really high. And some debt is not necessarily a result of not working hard or trying your best. You may have debt because you made unwise decisions, like the Volkswagen brand new car that I bought. That's, a bad decision. Or maybe you have something like a student loan, something like that. So regardless of why you have debt, you need to accept that you have debt, and you need to be proactive in moving forward so that you can pursue the vision that God's giving you. In my opinion, there are two types of debt. There is something that I like to call interpersonal debt. Debts that emotionally affect the people around you on a personal level. And these are the kind of debts where you might feel some shame or guilt when you see or think about the people that you owe money to. And I think most people in this room can attest to the fact that they've had at least one of those kinds of debts. And it might be, I owe my mom for groceries that, I borrowed some money from her last week. Or you bought a car from your brother and you're making payments to him and actually you're a month behind. Or you owe rent to your landlord who actually lives right upstairs. The next type of debt would be impersonal debt. So these are debts in which no personal feelings are involved. Maybe not paying your credit card this month, missing a phone payment, late payments on your internet bill. These debts affect people too, but typically we don't connect a face to the company, right? We get a piece of paper that says amount due. And so all debt is important to pay off, but debt priority starts with paying those debts that directly affect the relationships that are around you with the people in your life. And you know what? This is following the commandment of loving your neighbor. This is a 4-step plan. You guys have probably heard of Dave Ramsey. He's a financial guy. Has anyone heard of Dave Ramsey? Yeah. Okay. So this is it's called the Debt Snowball Method from DaveRamsey.com. And you can go onto the website. You don't have to pay for any of the stuff. It's just right there. And these are 4 principles that they have on there. And it's how we removed all of our small debt from our situation in actually a relatively short period of time following this method. But we want to remember to start with those interpersonal debts first. So list your debts from smallest to largest, regardless of the interest rate. Step 2, make minimum payments on all your debts except for the smallest. The third one is pay as much as possible on your smallest debt. And step 4 is to repeat until each debt is paid in full. And the reason why you want to start with your smallest debt first is because you're going to see progress really quickly. Has anyone ever followed this method of paying off debt? Yeah? It's pretty nice to scratch that MasterCard bill off or that small little bill that you have. And it gives us motivation to want to move forward. You know, there's some ways that you can pay your debts as quickly as possible. You can prayerfully go through your home and sell any items that you don't need to go on an off-grid property, or minimize your belongings. Remember, we made $6,000 one year just selling stuff. You can reduce your vehicles down to one if your family can manage it. You can work an extra day a week. You can get a second job. You can cash in your retirement savings. Does anyone have any other thoughts? Because I'm not very old, so maybe you've got some better thoughts, some of you people with more experience than me.
Is it everydollar.com? Yeah, just track everything.
Yeah.
That's everydollar.com
Yeah.
by Dave Ramsey's.
All right. So when God directs you to a place where He'll have you, He does not want to take your debts with you. Debts will cause stress and limit your ability to live in a remote location, because you need to think about how you're going to make money, and so you don't want to take those debts with you. And with no debts, your cost of living actually goes down substantially when you're not tied to the grid. That's what we found. It's like, wow, we don't have, gas bill and power bill and all that. We do, but it's different. It's not a $500 a month payment. It's actually reduced down quite a bit more than that. So, if you're making wise financial decisions, you will probably even have saved some money to build your own ark of safety, and even have a little bit of money left over to finance yourself while you're preparing. And that's kind of the goal that you'd like to do if you can actually do that. So the second thing we recommend is budget and keep records of your expenditures. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. I like that because I can see all the numbers, and it keeps me and us accountable.
An app for your cell phone, so there's no excuse not to track every dollar.
Yeah, she's saying there's an app for your cell phone, so there's no excuse not to track every dollar, just like your gas mileage, right? So, God says, the silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord of hosts, Haggai 2:8. So it's easy to spend money when we don't know what we're spending it on, isn't it? And at the end of the month, we're like, oh, I don't have enough money to pay my bills. So keep a record of your spending habits. You'd be surprised at how many dollars add up buying little things here and there. To this day, we have kept track of every single renovation that we've done, homesteading receipts, so we can track all those expenditures. Like I said, keeping a spreadsheet of that to make sure that we're keeping in budget, and we've actually found that we've come even under budget. So if you're keeping track, you can even find yourself coming under budget.
There's a saying that I've read before. It says, track it or you will fail.
Judy said there's a saying that says, track it or you will fail. It's true. Yeah. All right. Third one is to live well within your means. If God has given you a desire to prepare, now's the time to say, bye-bye extravagant habits. You need to check your level and your children's level of self-indulgence, and it's easy to become indulgent in worldly things. Are you eating out, buying lattes or coffees every day? Are you constantly making purchases to decorate your home? Are you buying the latest fashions? And men, don't forget about you, because I know someone in my own family who has 3 sets of the same kind of tools, and family members who have all kinds of toys, and just in case, right? So, and men who like to buy all the latest gadgets. What about entertainment? Do you have satellite, Netflix? Do you find yourself in the movie theaters, on the golf course, amusement parks, ski hill, sporting game events? Are you taking vacations? Those are expensive. Are your children involved in sports, hobbies, or expensive extracurricular activities? The equestrian hobby is one of the most expensive hobbies out there, and it's yikes. So these things can add up even into the hundreds of dollars. And you'd actually be surprised at what you can live without when you have a God-sized goal, if that's what your goal is. Not only that, reducing your expenses gives you the opportunity to actually save money. One pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth. Proverbs 13:7. So the fourth step, this is an interesting one, isn't it? So we're talking about paying off our debts, and many of you maybe are drowning in debts, and I'm sitting here going, you should be tithing on all your increase. And so how do you think you can possibly afford to give 10% of your income, or your pot bottle money, or your garage sale items, or even in the increase on the sale of your home? How can you do that? When we first learned about tithing, as time went on, there were months when the income was little, but the bills were still there. And so instead of tithing that month, I just write it on a little IOU on a piece of paper, and then I just put it in my desk drawer. And it's not that I didn't want to pay it, I couldn't pay it right now, so I'd pay it later, an IOU. So the months went by and the IOUs just started to add up, and pretty soon I looked at my little stack of papers and the amount was around $5,000. And I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of IOUs.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah. So I remember Sev ended up with a contract, and he gave me the check, and I said, well, pretty much covers our tithe. And so we didn't have a whole lot left over for the actual bill payments that we needed for the next few months. So we're kind of back at square one. So I was convicted that, it's first fruits, which is it belongs to God, and it's, we owe it to him. And so at the end of the month, or every time a single cent would come in, I instantly removed 10% and I put it into, I had a savings specifically for tithing account. And at the end of the month, I'd take that money and I would send it off. And so, how a lot of people say to me, oh, well, how do you know where to send your tithe money? And whether this is right or wrong, I don't know. But I believe that God, said to me, where are you being spiritually fed? Who's feeding you? Who's bringing you closer to the truth? Who's bringing you closer to God? And that's where I believe that your tithe money is to go, because it's to glorify him. Once we started doing that consistently every month, interestingly enough, our finances just started to change, and in a pretty good, big way. And this is when we started seeing blessings from God working in our lives to pay off our debts, because we'd purposed to come out of debt. And this is a controversial topic, actually, for a lot of people, because they don't believe that tithe is in effect to this day. So, I encourage you to do your homework, because I 100% believe that tithe is in effect today, and that we do owe 10% of all of our increase to God. And don't think that I'm trying to making a plea for this ministry or anything like that. But what you may not know is that independent ministries, a lot of how they run their ministry is based off of using their own personal resources. So, any of you out there, if you've been blessed by a ministry that has brought you closer to God, that has blessed your family, prayerfully ask God where he would like you to send your tithe. And you know what? He will actually bless you. And let's just see some verses here. You shall truly tithe all the increase of your grain that the field produces year by year. Deuteronomy 14:22. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase, so your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. That's a pretty nice blessing, isn't it? And will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Malachi 3:8-9. That's a pretty strong statement there. Financially supporting your family off-grid. So we talk a lot about living off-grid, and this is something that you will have to think about, because there is coming a time when there will be no buy, no sell. And for those who have chosen not to take the mark of the beast, you will have to be sustainable. You cannot rely on the system anymore. And you will possibly be far away from cities or towns to practically obtain employment. And as we kind of click through these, if you guys can think of anything to help, maybe some of our viewers out there, of possibilities for income living in a remote location, feel free to shout them out. So online income, do you have any skills that you can present while we still have internet in this day and age? Do you have a retirement savings or a pension? If you paid off your debts, maybe you can save money before you move. You can make money with gardening, animal husbandry, teaching. I talked to a lady who a couple weeks ago, and she said, I don't know how I'll even survive. And this woman was a teacher, and she taught celebrities. She was a music teacher, and she taught them how to sing. And I said, well, didn't God make you a teacher? And she said, well, yes. And I said, well, couldn't God make you a teacher online? And she said, well, I never thought about that. I said, I took guitar lessons online via Skype. She said, I never thought about that. So, try to think outside the box of sitting in front of a desk or being in person with other people. Depending on where you're at, you could sell real estate and trades skills. This is important. If you have any kind of trade skills, living in a remote location actually is kind of a little bit of a benefit because, as we know down the valley here, for them to get anyone from the city, it's quite a big deal, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
To find good qualified people in remote locations is actually difficult for people. And so if you have any sort of skills, electrical, plumbing, carpentry, even welding, that sort of thing, they will become actually quite valuable. And if you're diligent in keeping God's commandments, you will have a better chance of financially preparing for your family and maintaining that. And this week we've been taking a look at the blessings and the cursings in Deuteronomy 28. And so a good plan with some ideas is essential to your success. But do not have the mindset going out into the wilderness that God is just going to provide for you. Don't just pack up your suitcase and go, that's okay, God will just provide for me. Because I don't know, do you guys know anywhere in the Bible where God just handed over a silver platter and said, here you go. You don't have to do anything, and I'll just give it to you. And maybe there is. Can you guys think of one? Because I think we kind of have to meet God halfway. Do you guys believe that? Yeah. Okay. So physical preparation. What can we do to physically prepare? All right. So we can decrease our belongings. We can rid ourselves of electrical items that we don't need or things that will take a lot of power. Try to buy manual items for living off grid. But just have the very basics of what you need. When you're thinking of preparing, the one thing you don't want to do is go wild on buying a bunch of off-grid stuff. I would recommend that you actually live it before you actually decide what you need, because you can find out very quickly that you don't need as much as what you think you need. Health reform is a good one, and getting your home in order to sell. If your home's not in order to sell, if the paint is not done, if the curb appeal is not where it needs to be, how do you think your home's going to sell? If you're tied down to a home, God's not going to be able to take you out, is he? And health reform I think, is really important. A lot of people don't think about that. So if it means changing your diet, eliminating all processed foods, eating live food, fresh foods and vegetables, getting rid of any extra weight, removing the stress from your life. What we eat in our lifestyle will aid in a lot of unnecessary illness if we're not living a healthy lifestyle. And one of the reasons why you want to be physically fit or healthy is because if you're going to be in a remote location, you will not have easy access to hospitals and care like that. And in the end times, there may be children, elderly, other people that you may have to help, especially if, and I believe that this is not our last place, that we will actually have to flee into the mountains. And we've all done a hike up to Arthur's Mountain. What was that, a 6 hour hike? 6 kilometer hike. And I made the mistake of putting everyone's food in my backpack to test it out for the first time, and I wasn't wearing the right shoes. And yeah, if I had to go 100 kilometers, that would be quite something else. I'd want to think about that. So, and I just think about anyone who maybe couldn't do that. So we need healthy people, and we need healthy people to help those people who maybe couldn't get into a good state of health by that time. We want to learn how to grow our own food. And even if you can't set up a garden, learn everything you need to know in order to successfully grow your own food. We have a lady here this week, and she lives in downtown Toronto, and she has a 25 by 120 foot lot, and she has turned her entire front yard into food. And if you live in an apartment, you can do container gardening, so there's absolutely no excuses, because I've seen her produce that she's pulled in, and it looks pretty amazing. And growing your own food in the time of the end is going to be one of the most important ways you can keep yourself alive physically. And, I really stress, don't depend on others for this. Presumption, this presumption that you have standing in front of your children one day and saying, I'm sorry, guys, I just didn't think growing my own food was a priority. Education, homeschool, if you plan to educate your children and plan for it. We're in the time of the end, and therefore college and university, to me, is not really the focal point. Getting your kids to do basic learning, reading and writing and math is key, but life skills will become their main schooling. And when you're going off grid, having skills or refining them is really key. I bought Janae a course from Noah Bradley from Handmade Houses, and I don't promote things unless I really think that they're of value. And he has been featured in many magazines across the countries, lives in West Virginia, I think. And I've actually spoken back and forth with him on email. He's a really nice man. He's a believer. And he has online courses for building. He's got a log cabin course, and with that course, he actually takes you through building a small little shed, a small little log cabin, like a little shed. And he teaches you how to use tools, the manual ones that they would have used in the old days, and even more modern tools. And he's got courses on building stone houses and stonework, and he also has a new one on timber-built homes. So if you have the time, and you're sitting in your homes and you have the time, learn these skills. Learn how to ferment, learn how to garden, learn some of these skills that you don't have before you even come out here. And if you also have the opportunity to learn from someone with any of the trades, don't pass up that opportunity that God may be giving you to learn. And it might be a change from employment, from an office job to something else. Your dad.
Yeah. Learning new skills and construction skills are definitely something. And with, as far as growing gardens and doing all this kind of stuff, getting acquainted with it before the move is going to help you to become a lot more, have more peace in yourself. My dad is 55 years old right now, and he is he's just learning how to do construction, and he's loving it. But he never knew how at all. He never knew anything about construction at all, and you'd be surprised at how quickly you can learn stuff.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very helpful in the time of the end.
Okay. And finally, don't move to the country prematurely if it's out of God's will. If you do that, you may actually bring the time of trouble upon yourself prematurely. Not God's time of trouble, but a little time of trouble for yourself. It might be very uncomfortable for you if you step outside of His guidance. Spiritual preparation. We've left this step for last because we want to leave you with the concept that our spiritual condition we feel is the most important place to begin when preparing for the time of the end. And we talked about our renovation, how it was a spiritual renovation as well as a physical renovation, and it actually really was. There's a lot of growth that happened in those years. And so if you focus on character building, that's really going to give you a head start. No matter where you go, and especially if you go to a community. I can't even imagine coming to the community and having the mindset that I did 6 years ago, I probably would have been kicked out by now. So we can understand prophecy, list all the 613 statutes, know all the beasts in Revelation, and how to live off-grid. But if our character is not the example of Yeshua, then none of that will matter on the judgment day, will it? So we want to remember our calling at this time in history, which is to build an ark for the saving of ourselves and our families. And we want to preach to the world and to be a watchman. And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Every single creature. Well, who's going to do this? He's probably going to need some help. So remember the idea that if you want to help others, you have to help yourself first. And we want to give ourselves the best possible spiritual chance for being a tool for God. And to be a watchman at our place of refuge means that other souls will be saved for the heavenly kingdom. So we can start right now in our own homes, because our home is our first works. And some people get this confused and they flip it around, and ministry becomes their first work, and they leave their home. And you ever heard the term that the pastor's kids are usually the worst kids? Not always, but that's a lot of times that's the case. And there's a reason why, because they're giving to others rather than their own flock. So we have 3 letters. We have letters to men, letters to the women, and letters to children.
So this is from 1 Timothy 3, 1-7. Here is a trustworthy saying. Whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap.
That's from 1 Timothy 3, 1-7. Now, you guys know your Bibles, so you know that that's referring to the bishops and what the bishops, kind of the checklist of what needed to be in order. But I believe that all men are called to be leaders of their home, first and foremost. And so if you're going to be a leader of your home, you're going to be the bishop of the home. So these are the things that you want to take a look at for yourself. Oh.
Another letter to men from Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Ephesians 6:4. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. 1 Timothy 5:8.
So, Seb, what kind of practical things can you do as a leader of the home?
Well, in all that we do, I would say do it in love and have patience, because otherwise, what's the point?
But what does love mean?
Well, keeping his commandments in everything that we do, in our daily walk, and putting our wives first, our children first, serving them. We do all these things, and we will set ourselves up for success for when we are called to be a leader in the church or in a community. There's a really interesting thing that I found out a while back. The Sanhedrin. Do you guys know the Sanhedrin? The leaders in. Is there still a Sanhedrin actually right now today? Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure when that started, but the Sanhedrin was a group of basically the leaders and the elders of Israel, especially in Jerusalem, and who basically made a lot of heavy decisions regarding the going-ons within that system. And it was really interesting. I found out that the leaders that were chosen to be leaders and a part of the Sanhedrin had to be married, and they had to have children, so that they'd be more have more compassion and have more understanding and more not so exacting, and it was kind of a safeguard to make things work better. So I thought that was really interesting.
Okay, a letter to the women. Wives too must be worthy of respect, not slanderers, self-controlled, faithful in everything. 1 Timothy 3:11. And these are just a few things. I mean, there's hundreds of verses in the Bible, helping us with our spiritual walk and how we can be better people. We can look at the Proverbs 31 woman is both literal and spiritual, and that's a really good place to start. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Ephesians 5:22-24. And this doesn't mean that husbands are better than wives, and it doesn't mean that they can be controlling. Husbands and wives are on an equal playing field. You would agree with that, wouldn't you, Jeanette?
I would.
Yeah. But do you reverence your husband?
Absolutely.
And do you love him? And you hold him up at the gates for the elders? That's what we want to do, and we want to support them and lift them up, and we want to be on the same page as them. And Jeanette said something interesting the other day. We were having a conversation in here, and she said, if you're going to make decisions, even if they're bad, make sure that you're on board with them together. Make the bad decisions together. Because when we're divided on something, boy, does Satan just get right in the middle, doesn't he? And he can just rip us apart. So it's good to be on the same page. And train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22:6. I firmly believe that one of the greatest and most honorable ministries in this entire world is being a mother and being a parent. And there's nothing better that you can do, honestly. Because, I look at my own family, and I have 6. And if I was to raise up a bunch of infidels, what would I be doing for the cause, right? And so it's really important right from little, and children are with their mothers in the very early years and well into their years. And so it's so important that mothers take the time with their children, invest in them, and love them the best they can. Not putting them first. Husbands come first, right? But definitely right below that, in investing in them. And don't forget, we're not going to forget about the children and the youth. Not forgetting about you, Gabe. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Ephesians 6:1. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God give thee. Exodus 20:12. And hear, my son, and I'll put in there my daughter also, and receive my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. Proverbs 4:10. Probably because, like he's talking to the son here, I'm thinking, if you were to tell him how to be safe, and he just didn't listen to you, maybe his days would be quite shortened if he got into an accident, So now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them, John 13:17. And I don't know if you'd be blessed by any of these things, but that's a good verse, and we can always take a look at the word, and we can pull out all kinds of things on how to run our lives. But I hope that we have given you just a little bit of vision today as to why you might want to leave the cities, because the greatest commandment, or the commandment, is love God and love your neighbor. And how are we going to love our neighbor? It's not just by going and hiding in the wilderness all by our little selves. It is to love our neighbor is to want to be that watchman on the wall, to want to cry aloud, spare not. And I think we have to get to that place where if we are speaking what God is asking us to speak, there's going to be people out there that are not going to like what you have to say. So we're here for the saving of souls for the kingdom of heaven, and that's what we all want to do. So let's pray.
All right.